Hello everyone, Professor GonGoon here. In today's video I'll be explaining how to analyze a champion's strengths and weaknesses. This is intended to be a follow-up of my pre-trading video where I explain the basics of how to analyze a champion. I'll put a link to it somewhere on the screen. After you analyze a champion, you need to compare that champion's strengths and weaknesses to your champion's strengths and weaknesses, and then figure out the best way to approach the game while keeping them in mind. In this game I play Akali, and if we were to do a quick analysis on Akali, we come to realize that Akali is a melee champion with high damage, but the downside to her is that if she wants to do that high damage, she has to be in melee range. Though her Q is a ranged ability, activating the mark does a lot more damage than just throwing it. Her W is an AoE slow that also gives Akali stealth and resistances while in the shroud, and her E does damage to all enemies in a small area. Right here you should notice she lacks one essential thing that most currently viable champions have, and that is a gap closer. As a melee champion with no gap closer pre-level 6, that relies on being a melee range to do good damage, you'll have a tough time against any ranged champion. But Akali's strength in this matchup is that once I hit level 6 and jump on Twisted Fate with my ultimate once or twice, I'll probably force him to use a summoner spell, if not kill him. I realize this in itself that I'll be behind in CS, but I plan to make up for that post 6 by dominating Twisted Fate and picking up kills via roaming. With this plan, I'm playing towards my strengths by focusing on surviving in lane and getting experience instead of taking a lot of damage for CS. Once I hit level 6, I'll be able to bully Twisted Fate around, and then I can get all the CS that I want. Twisted Fate's biggest strength relative to this matchup is that he's ranged and he can constantly harass me with his abilities and auto attacks. Since I have no gap closer, I pose no threat to him, and the only offensive play I'm capable of doing is shrouding the area between me and Twisted Fate and walking towards him. What Twisted Fate needs to do in this matchup is try to harass and zone me from minions as much as he can. It's hard for Twisted Fate to kill me pre-6, but if Twisted Fate can force me back to base, it will delay my level 6 power spike, which will allow him to control the lane for a little bit longer and possibly make a play with his ultimate before I hit level 6. It also helps to get your jungler to camp snowbally champions. If you can get them behind, they usually stay behind, but if they get ahead, they'll usually stay ahead. So I hit level 6 and I'm 15 CS behind, mostly due to not last hitting well with Akali. I can never really judge the Q damage well. The first item I buy is Sork Boots, and for multiple reasons. The level 2 boost will allow me to do more damage to Twisted Fate. They also allow me to stick to him easier and enable me to roam much more efficiently. And if you recall, I mentioned this was my plan earlier on. But Twisted Fate realizes his current weakness and buys a Negatron Cloak as the first item. That's an item you'll probably never see Twisted Fate rush outside of this matchup, and it's really good of him to notice how vulnerable he is and pick this item up. It's debatable as to whether it was the correct item to buy, but if he had gone for damage, he'd be so squishy that I'd just look at him and he'd explode. I personally would have purchased a defensive item like him, but I may have gotten a Chalice instead of a Negatron, but that's not the point. He knew what I was capable of doing and tried to prevent it, unlike what I do in this clip right here. I forget that they have a Twisted Fate and I overextend to kill Vlad. Outside of the laning phase, Twisted Fate's biggest strength is collapsing on people with his ultimate, and I play right into it. You need to remember to always consider the strengths and weaknesses of every individual champion during each phase of the game, and also team compositions. If you're going against a team with globals, it might be best to move as a 5-man unit so enemy team can't pick anyone off. If you're going against a siege composition, you might want to hard engage before they have the opportunity to push a tower and siege. You also need to remember that individual champions have different strengths and weaknesses during different phases of the game. Aurelia, for example, is known to have a weak early game, a godlike mid game, and a subpar late game. So as Aurelia, you want to make most of your plays during the mid game when you just get your Triforce, because that's when you're your strongest. Tristana is the opposite. She has a strong early game, a terrible mid game, and a godlike late game. So as Tristana, you'd want to make plays in the early and late stages of the game, and try your best to just farm during the mid game. The important thing to take away from this is that you should always have a plan for every game you play. In this game I realized I wasn't going to beat Twisted Fate until level 6, and I didn't try to force anything. I just tried to get every CS that I could without taking too much damage, because I knew once I hit level 6, there wasn't much that he'd be able to do. You also need to be ready to adapt to play around an enemy's strengths and your weaknesses. Twisted Fate bought the Negatron Cloak to negate his weakness, but it wasn't enough. Even though his adaptation somewhat failed, the ability to adapt shows a sign of a good player. I also believe he went on to do really well that game. Anyways, I hope you guys learned something from this video, and if you did, be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Professor GonGoon signing out. Peace.